What are some strange discoveries made deep below the surface? Some of the strangest discoveries made deep below the surface aren't ancient ruins or fossils. They're forgotten snapshots of human industry, frozen exactly where people left them. Old mines in particular can feel like underground time capsules. You crawl through modern workings, clear debris, and suddenly uncover machinery, or tunnels no one alive even knew were there. One of the wildest examples is finding massive equipment abandoned underground, like a giant steam pump from 1912 still sitting in place. Imagine hauling something that huge down shafts and through tunnels more than a century ago, assembling it in darkness, running it for years, and then simply leaving it there when the mine changed hands or shut down. It's industrial archaeology hidden inside the earth. Then there are the smaller details that hit even harder: old single-jack drill bits worn down by hand drilling, forgotten tools, or even unexploded powder still packed in a bootleg hole from decades ago. Those aren't museum pieces behind glass. They're exactly where workers last touched them. Time stops differently underground. Sometimes it gets stranger. Crews clear a muck pile or collapsed section and suddenly expose an entire drift that isn't on any surviving maps. No records, no mention, just a hidden tunnel built by men long gone. Maybe it was a side project, a secret ore chase, or simply never documented properly. Either way, it feels like discovering a lost room in a buried city. And then you find expensive gear, old slusher systems and machinery that would have cost a fortune at the time, still abandoned because removing it to the surface was harder than leaving it behind. That's what makes deep underground discoveries so strange. Sometimes the earth doesn't hide mysteries of nature. It hides entire chapters of human labor everyone forgot were there. Story 2. One of the strangest things found deep below the surface is something that sounds almost impossible at first: naturally blue salt. Blue halite is a rare form of halite, the same mineral most people know simply as rock salt, except instead of being clear or white, certain crystals appear deep blue or violet blue. Seeing it underground can feel surreal, like someone dropped polished gemstones into an ore face. What makes it so unusual is just how scarce it can be. In some mines, crews may move thousands of tons of material in a shift and only occasionally uncover a single, small piece, maybe the size of a golf ball. Think about that ratio for a second. Mountains of ordinary ore processed, and hidden somewhere inside all of it is one tiny flash of impossible color. That rarity is part of what makes miners remember it. The blue color usually isn't caused by dye or obvious impurities in the way people might expect. It's often linked to structural defects in the crystal lattice created by natural radiation or geological processes over immense spans of time. Tiny disruptions in the arrangement of atoms can change how light is absorbed and reflected, turning common salt into something that looks precious and alien. That's one of the coolest parts of geology. Ordinary ingredients can become extraordinary through pressure, time, chemistry, and chance. Sodium chloride is one of the most common minerals people encounter, yet deep underground, the earth occasionally remakes it into something rare enough to feel mythical. What makes discoveries like blue halite special isn't just value, it's contrast. You go underground expecting rock, dust, machinery, and darkness. Then the wall suddenly gives you a glimpse of vivid blue crystal hidden for millions of years. The earth has a habit of hiding beauty in the least glamorous places. Story 3. A seamount is an underwater mountain, usually volcanic in origin, rising from the sea floor but not breaking the ocean surface. Some of them are absolutely gigantic, rivaling or exceeding famous land mountains in total height when measured from base to summit. What makes this so surreal is scale. People imagine the seafloor as mostly flat mud and darkness. but in reality, it contains vast mountain ranges, cliffs, trenches, and isolated peaks taller than many landscapes on land. A ship can pass over one for centuries with no clue that thousands of meters below, there's a buried volcanic giant directly underneath. Many seamounts formed from hotspots or tectonic activity millions of years ago. Some are extinct volcanoes, while others may still show geological activity. Over time, currents shape them, sediments bury parts of them, and marine life colonizes their slopes. Because they interrupt deep ocean currents, they often become biological hotspots where fish, corals, and strange deep-sea creatures gather. In a way, they're underwater islands without air. Some have only been discovered through sonar mapping in recent decades. That means humanity reached space before fully mapping many mountains on its own planet. Entire peaks larger than cities remained hidden simply because they were covered by water. What makes gigantic seamounts feel so strange is that they expose how incomplete our mental map of Earth still is. We think mountains are obvious things you can see on a horizon, but some of the largest on the planet rise silently through darkness where sunlight never reaches. There's something deeply humbling about knowing Earth can hide mountains big enough to matter globally and still keep them mostly invisible. Story 4. One of the recent discoveries made deep below the ocean's surface was the so-called mysterious golden orb, an object found resting on the seafloor during a remotely operated vehicle expedition off the coast of Alaska. Cameras showed a small, smooth sphere with a metallic golden color attached to rock, with a single hole or opening in one side. Immediately, people online started calling it an alien egg, lost artifact, or some unknown life form. And honestly, the reaction made sense. In the darkness of the deep sea, lit only by ROV lights, almost anything unusual already looks extraterrestrial. A gleaming orb with a neat opening sitting among sponges and rock feels like exactly the kind of thing you'd expect in science fiction. Even the scientists on the expedition joked about how bizarre it looked. The more likely explanation, though, is biological rather than alien. Deep-sea researchers suggested it was probably some kind of egg case, sponge-related structure, or remains of an organism with soft tissue that had broken down. The ocean floor is full of poorly documented species, especially at depth, so strange-looking objects often turn out to be life in forms we simply haven't cataloged well yet. That's what makes the discovery so interesting. It wasn't necessarily the orb itself, but the fact that even with modern cameras and marine science, we can still find objects on our own planet that experts can't instantly identify. The deep ocean remains one of Earth's least explored environments. Every expedition has a chance of revealing something that looks impossible at first glance. So while the golden orb probably wasn't extraterrestrial, it served as a reminder that you don't need aliens to find alien-looking things. Earth's oceans still produce enough mysteries on their own. Story 5. Off the coast of Vancouver Island, scientists exploring a seamount found what looked like a normal hydrothermal area at first, until cameras revealed thousands upon thousands of large white eggs carpeting the warm, rocky slopes. It was less like a geological site and more like stumbling onto a hidden nursery. The eggs belonged to Pacific white skates, relatives of rays that had chosen the volcano as a breeding ground. That's where it gets fascinating. Deep-sea water is usually cold, which can slow embryo development dramatically. But geothermal warmth seeping from the seafloor creates natural incubators. By laying eggs in these warmer zones, the skates may shorten development time and improve survival odds. So, you end up with something that sounds almost fictional, a dormant or low-activity submarine volcano functioning as a maternity ward. Heat rising from Earth's interior helps hatch the next generation of animals in darkness, thousands of feet below the waves. Visually, it's surreal. Imagine black volcanic rock, dim ROV lights, and every surface dotted with pale, leathery egg cases. The contrast between harsh geology and delicate reproduction makes it feel especially strange. Volcanoes are usually symbols of destruction, yet here one was supporting life. Discoveries like this also remind scientists how little we know about the deep sea. Entire reproductive strategies and critical habitats can remain hidden until a submersible happens to pass by. If no one looks, a species' most important nursery can remain unknown. What makes the egg-covered volcano so alien is that it combines two worlds we don't expect together: fire from the planet's interior and the quiet beginnings of life. Deep below the surface, Earth turned a volcano into an incubator. Story 6. Deep beneath the ocean's surface, scientists discovered a baffling methane leak that looked almost like the seafloor itself was breathing. In certain regions of the deep sea, cracks and sediments release streams of methane bubbles that rise continuously through freezing dark water, sometimes for years. To researchers watching through submersible cameras, it can resemble an underwater spring made of gas instead of water. What makes these leaks so strange is that methane is usually associated with pipelines, swamps, or industrial activity, not natural vents kilometers below the ocean. Yet huge amounts of it can become trapped underground in sediments, produced by microbes breaking down organic material or generated by deeper geological processes. When pressure shifts, faults open, or warming destabilizes deposits, the gas can escape upward in dramatic plumes. Some of the most mysterious cases involve methane hydrates, sometimes called fire ice. These are cage-like crystals of water trapping methane molecules under cold, high-pressure conditions. They look like ice, but if brought to the surface and ignited, the gas can burn. Imagine frozen material on the seabed containing flammable fuel, then slowly releasing bubbles through cracks in the darkness. It sounds fictional, but it's real geology. Even stranger, these leak sites often support ecosystems. Specialized bacteria feed on methane, and larger organisms like worms, clams, and crabs can gather around them. So instead of being lifeless hazards, some leaks become islands of activity powered by chemical energy rather than sunlight. Scientists care deeply about them because methane is a potent greenhouse gas, and understanding how much escapes from oceans matters for climate models. What makes a baffling methane leak feel so alien is that it turns the seabed into something active and unpredictable, a hidden world where the ground exhales fuel and life grows around it. Story 7. Buried inside ordinary-looking stone, some of the most surreal discoveries are moments frozen so perfectly that they feel staged. Imagine splitting open a 20-foot slab of rock and finding 3 dinosaur footprints preserved inside it, each around 18 inches long, 3-toed, and nearly a foot wide. Then the slab breaks in half, revealing both sides of the prints, a convex cast on one surface and the matching concave impression on the other. It's like nature made its own mold and cast set, then hid it underground for millions of years. That's what makes fossil trackways so incredible. Bones tell you what an animal looked like after death. Footprints capture behavior while it was alive. Those 3 prints aren't just shapes, they're evidence of movement. At some point in deep time, a large theropod-like dinosaur stepped across soft sediment, pressed weight into wet ground, and kept walking. Mud became stone, and that passing moment survived longer than civilizations. The details matter too. Toe spread, claw impressions, stride spacing, and depth can all hint at species type, direction, speed, and substrate conditions. A single footprint can tell paleontologists surprising amounts about an animal no one ever saw. 3 in sequence are even better because now you're seeing a path, not just a step. And then there's the other rock you mentioned, preserved seafloor alongside a giant fern. That's another kind of time capsule entirely. Ancient ripple marks, marine sediments, plant impressions, all compressed into stone that records worlds that no longer exist. One slab remembers an ocean bottom. Another remembers forests and swamps. Another remembers something huge walking across mud. What makes finds like these so strange is how casual they seem. It's just rock until it suddenly isn't. Then you realize you're holding direct physical contact with vanished Earths stacked beneath your feet. Story 8. Far below where sunlight ends and pressure becomes crushing, scientists found the deepest dwelling fish ever recorded, a discovery that pushed the known limits of vertebrate life. In deep ocean trenches, such as the Mariana Trench and other Hadal zones, cameras captured snailfish living at depths once thought nearly impossible for fish. We're talking miles beneath the surface, in darkness so complete and pressure so immense that most surface animals would be destroyed almost instantly. What makes this discovery so baffling is that fish are relatively complex vertebrates. They have bones or cartilage or organs, nervous systems, and cellular chemistry that usually struggle under extreme pressure. Yet species like the snailfish have evolved to function where pressure can exceed 1,000 times what humans experience at sea level. Instead of looking monstrous, they often appear delicate and soft-bodied, almost ghost-like. That softness is part of the adaptation. Heavy, rigid structures can be a disadvantage under such pressure. So many deep trench fish have gelatinous tissues, reduced mineralization, and specialized molecules that keep proteins working when physics says they shouldn't. Their bodies are tuned to a world where pressure is the defining force. The deepest observations stunned researchers because there seems to be a practical depth limit for fish life. Beyond a certain point, pressure interferes with biochemistry in ways that become difficult to overcome. So every new record holder helps define where vertebrate life may finally stop. Even stranger, these fish aren't alone. They hunt crustaceans and scavenge in trenches once imagined as barren voids. Life persists in places humans once considered unreachable and unlivable. What makes the deepest dwelling fish feel so alien is the contrast. It isn't a giant monster ruling the abyss. It's a fragile-looking animal calmly existing where an astronaut suit would be useless and darkness never ends. Story 9. Off the coast of Sicily, the seafloor gave up something extraordinary. Physical remains from what archaeologists identified as the first ancient naval battle ever located with confidence. In November 2013, researchers announced the recovery of a remarkable cache of artifacts from waters near the Agadi Islands, tied to the final clash of the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage in 241 BC. For centuries, ancient sea battles mostly lived in texts and imagination. Historians knew fleets fought, ships sank, and empires changed course on open water, but the battlefield itself was usually gone without a trace. Oceans move wreckage, rot wood, scatter metal, and bury evidence under sediment. Then divers and survey teams began finding something incredible: bronze warship rams, helmets, armor fragments, and weapons resting on the seabed after more than 2,000 years. The bronze rams were especially dramatic. Mounted to the bows of ancient warships, these heavy battering devices were designed to smash into enemy hulls, splinter planks, and sink vessels through brute force and momentum. To hold one in modern hands is to hold the business end of an ancient battleship. Some still bore inscriptions linking them to state production and military organization. Montefortino-style helmets and other gear also helped confirm the human reality behind the history. Sailors, marines, rowers, men who fought and drowned in a battle that ended a war and reshaped the Mediterranean. What makes this discovery so strange is that an event once known mostly through writers suddenly became tangible. The battlefield had been sitting underwater the entire time, silent and scattered. It's a reminder that history doesn't always vanish. Sometimes it sinks, waits, and lets the sea keep it until we learn where to look. Story 10. Hidden inside a submerged Roman shipwreck, archaeologists found something far smaller than treasure, yet arguably more intimate. A 2,000-year-old medicinal pill that had survived intact. While gold coins and statues usually grab headlines, this tiny object offered something rarer, a direct glimpse into everyday healthcare in the ancient Roman Empire. The pill was discovered in a sunken vessel off the coast of Italy, preserved inside a small container among the wreck's contents. Roughly tablet-shaped and remarkably well maintained, it had endured 2 millennia underwater. Think about how improbable that is. Food rots, wood decays, cloth disappears, yet a compact piece of ancient medicine remains recognizable after centuries beneath the sea. When scientists analyzed it, they found it wasn't some mystical cure-all, but a carefully prepared pharmaceutical mixture. Studies suggested ingredients such as zinc compounds, starches, plant material, and beeswax. Researchers believe it may have been intended for eye treatment rather than swallowed as a modern pill, likely dissolved or applied in some medicinal form. In other words, Roman medicine was more sophisticated and specialized than many people assume. That's what makes the discovery so fascinating. It collapses the distance between us and them. Ancient people weren't only building roads and fighting wars, they were treating infections, soothing inflammation, packaging remedies, and carrying medical supplies across the sea. Someone aboard that ship thought this little tablet mattered enough to bring on a journey. The wreck itself became an accidental time capsule, sealing ordinary human concerns inside layers of water and sediment. What makes this find strange isn't size or spectacle, it's survival. A single dose of healthcare from 2,000 years ago outlasted empires, storms, and the ship that carried it. Sometimes the smallest artifacts tell the most human stories. Story 11. Buried beneath coastal sediment in Croatia, archaeologists uncovered an extraordinary time capsule, a boat wreck dated to roughly 3,200 years ago. That places it deep in the late Bronze Age, long before classical Rome, before many famous kingdoms reached their height, and during a period when Mediterranean trade networks were already linking distant cultures by sea. What makes discoveries like this so incredible is how rarely wood survives for that long. Ships are usually among the first things history loses. Timber rots, marine organisms consume it, storms break hulls apart, and shifting seabeds scatter whatever remains. For a vessel from around 1200 BC to survive in recognizable form requires near-perfect conditions, often burial under mud or sand that seals it away from oxygen and destructive organisms. Instead of just finding cargo or scattered fragments, researchers were able to study actual construction methods. That means planks, joinery, hull design, fastening systems, and clues about how ancient shipbuilders solved engineering problems without modern tools. Every preserved beam becomes evidence of forgotten craftsmanship, how they shaped the wood, waterproofed seams, balanced strength with weight, and designed vessels for coastal travel can all be read from the wreck itself. The timing is especially fascinating. Around this era, the wider Mediterranean world was experiencing upheaval, often associated with the Bronze Age collapse. Trade routes shifted, kingdoms weakened, and societies changed dramatically. Yet this boat reminds us that ordinary movement continued. Sailors still traveled, merchants still moved goods, fishermen still worked waters that had already supported generations before them. What makes the Croatian wreck feel so strange is that it turns abstract prehistory into something tangible. Instead of imagining ancient seafarers, you're looking at the actual machine they trusted with their lives. For over 3 millennia, the sea kept it hidden, preserving a vessel built by hands whose names vanished long ago. Story 12. Deep in a flooded cave system on Yucatan Peninsula, underwater archaeologists entered a place long surrounded by local fear and stories, then emerged with one of the strangest discoveries imaginable: human bones and elongated skulls resting in the darkness below. The site, a cenote known as Sac Wayum, was explored in 2014 and revealed a submerged chamber littered with skeletal remains. Cenotes are natural sinkholes formed when limestone collapses, exposing groundwater-filled caverns beneath the surface. To the ancient Maya civilization, these places were far more than geological features. They were sources of fresh water, sacred locations, and often seen as portals to the underworld. Many became ceremonial sites where offerings, valuables, and sometimes human remains were placed. That spiritual significance is part of why discoveries in cenotes often feel eerie, even before anything is found. The elongated skulls added another layer of mystery. While sensational headlines often imply something supernatural, cranial elongation is a well-documented cultural practice in many ancient societies, including some Mesoamerican groups. During infancy, when skull bones are still flexible, boards or bindings could gradually shape the head into an elongated form associated with identity, beauty, status, or tradition. So the unusual skull shape was human-made, not inhuman. Still, imagine the scene. Divers descending through narrow openings into silent black water, lights sweeping across bones that had rested untouched for centuries. Human remains in a sacred flooded cavern naturally trigger the imagination. What makes Sac Wayum so strange is the combination of geology, ritual, and preservation. A cave hidden underwater became a sealed archive of belief and mortality. It's a reminder that some of history's most haunting discoveries aren't monsters or treasures, but the places where ancient people met the sacred and left their dead behind. Story 13. Beneath the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, Swedish divers uncovered something far older than shipwrecks or lost cargo, traces of human life dating back roughly 11,000 years. These underwater relics were linked to Stone Age people, who once lived on land that is now submerged, turning the seafloor into a hidden archaeological landscape. That's what makes discoveries like this so strange. Today, it's ocean, but after the last ice age, coastlines and water levels were dramatically different. Areas now underwater were once dry ground where people camped, hunted, built tools, and moved through changing environments as glaciers retreated. What seems like an empty seabed may actually be a drowned chapter of human prehistory. Divers and researchers found remnants believed to have been left behind by early inhabitants of what is now Sweden. These included worked materials and artifacts that normally would have decayed long ago if left on land. Instead, unusual preservation conditions protected them. The lack of oxygen in certain sediments slows decomposition, while thick layers of organic-rich gytja mud can seal objects away like natural packaging. For archaeologists, that is extraordinary. Organic materials such as wood, bone, plant fibers, and other fragile remains are often lost first in normal sites. Underwater environments like this can preserve details impossible to recover elsewhere, giving clearer pictures of how ancient people actually lived. Imagine tools or discarded items lying quietly beneath dark water for 11 millennia, while entire civilizations rose and vanished above them. Long before written history, before cities, before metalworking, people stood on that ground and left traces of ordinary life. What makes the Baltic finds feel almost unreal is perspective. We tend to think the sea covers natural emptiness, but sometimes it covers villages, campsites, pathways, and memories of worlds older than history itself. Story 14. Off the southern coast of Yonaguni, Japan, lies one of the most debated underwater sites on Earth, a massive submerged rock formation often called the Yonaguni Monument. Resting beneath the sea, it features terraces, sharp edges, flat platforms, and step-like surfaces that make it look uncannily like the remains of a lost city. Since its discovery, people have argued over whether it is an ancient human-made ruin or simply geology playing tricks on the eye. What makes the site so compelling is its appearance. Underwater footage shows broad rectangular faces, long straight lines, seeming staircases, and large blocks that resemble intentionally cut stone. To many viewers, it looks less like random rock and more like architecture. If you were shown the images without context, Sunken Temple would feel like a reasonable guess. That led to dramatic claims that the structure could be around 10,000 years old, potentially older than many known monumental civilizations. If true, it would force a major rethink of prehistoric engineering in East Asia. Naturally, that possibility attracted huge attention. But many geologists push back hard on the man-made interpretation. The local sandstone can fracture along natural plains, producing straight edges and angular shapes. Tectonic activity, erosion, and wave action can sculpt formations that seem artificial, especially underwater, where perspective and lighting exaggerate symmetry. In their view, Yonaguni is an unusual but natural formation, perhaps with minor human modification at most. That split is what keeps the mystery alive. It's not a solved puzzle with fringe believers. It's a genuine disagreement about how to interpret striking evidence. What makes Yonaguni feel so strange is that it sits exactly where myth and science overlap. It could be a lost monument, a natural masterpiece, or something in between. Either way, the ocean is hiding a structure convincing enough that experts still argue over whether nature built it or humans did. Story 15. In the Gulf of Alakanis, near Zakynthos, Greece, divers found something that seemed like the start of a lost city headline. Beneath shallow water were formations resembling cobblestone paving, pillar bases, building remains, and organized stone features that looked strikingly artificial. In 2013, announcements described what appeared to be an ancient underwater settlement or port structure, complete with around 20 circular stone bases featuring central incisions that seemed perfect for supporting wooden columns. At first glance, it had all the ingredients of a major archaeological discovery: public buildings submerged by time, harbor ruins from a forgotten settlement, traces of organized urban life now hidden under the sea. It fits a familiar and exciting pattern. Coastlines shift, earthquakes happen, seas rise, cities sink. Greece, with its immense historical depth, felt like exactly the kind of place where such a discovery could emerge. But then came the twist. Later, scientific analysis argued the ruins were not ruins at all. Instead of masonry and architecture, Researchers concluded the structures were the result of natural geological and chemical processes. Mineral-rich fluids moving through sediment can create concretions and cemented formations that mimic columns, pavements, and foundation stones. In this case, microbial activity and hydrocarbon seepage likely helped shape the site into something convincingly man-made. That's what makes Zakynthos so fascinating. It wasn't merely a false alarm. It was a reminder that nature can accidentally imitate civilization with unsettling accuracy. Straight lines, circular bases, orderly spacing, features we instinctively associate with design, can sometimes emerge without any human builder involved. The site sits in that perfect gray zone where archaeology meets geology. For a brief moment, it looked like a drowned city. Then science suggested it was a natural sculpture garden built by chemistry and time. What makes the Zakynthos structures strange is that they fooled experts and the public alike, proving Earth can counterfeit history when it wants to. Story 16. Hidden beneath the clear waters of Qiandao Lake, China lies an entire city, frozen in time. Known as Xicheng, or Lion City, it rests below the surface near Five Lion Mountain after being intentionally submerged in the 20th century when the valley was flooded to create a reservoir. What makes it extraordinary is not that it sank, but how completely it survived. Many underwater ruins are broken, scattered, or reduced to fragments. Lion City is different. Streets, gates, walls, stairways, arches, and carved facades remained remarkably intact after more than 50 years underwater. Instead of a ruin dissolved by time, divers found something closer to a preserved urban shell, like a city paused rather than destroyed. Originally established centuries ago, Xicheng served as a regional center with architecture reflecting imperial Chinese styles. Stonework decorated with dragons, phoenixes, lions, and ornate inscriptions still clings to buildings beneath the lake. Because the water shielded it from sunlight, wind erosion, and many surface weathering forces, details that might have faded on land remained astonishingly sharp. That creates a surreal contrast. Above the site is a peaceful artificial lake dotted with islands and tourism. Below it sits a lost city, complete with roads and monuments, silent in green-blue light. Few places on Earth offer such a direct split between modern landscape and preserved historical world occupying the same space. Its rediscovery in the modern era renewed fascination because Lion City isn't just archaeology. It's a time capsule from a known historical period sealed by water rather than buried by sand. What makes Xicheng feel so strange is that entire cities are supposed to vanish gradually. This one was simply lowered beneath a lake and waited, almost intact, for divers to visit decades later. Story 17, just off the coast of Pavlopetri, Greece lies a city so old and so well preserved that it rewrites what many people imagine early urban life looked like. Resting only a few meters beneath the water in southern Greece, Pavlopetri is widely considered one of the oldest known submerged cities in the world, with origins reaching back roughly 5,000 years. What makes the site extraordinary is not simply its age, but its sophistication. Beneath the shallow sea, archaeologists mapped streets, building foundations, courtyards, tombs, and organized neighborhoods. There is evidence of two-story houses, planned roadways, gardens, or open domestic spaces, and systems for managing water through channels and pipes. This was not a primitive cluster of huts. It was a functioning, intelligently designed settlement. That's the part many people find surprising. We often underestimate Bronze Age communities, imagining early cities as crude and chaotic. Pavlopetri shows planning, engineering, and social structure thousands of years ago. People were already organizing urban space, handling resource, burying their dead, and building for long-term habitation. Its underwater preservation adds another layer of mystery. Earthquakes, shifting coastlines, and sea level changes likely helped submerge the city over time, sealing parts of it beneath sand and shallow water. Instead of being erased by later construction, it was hidden. Today, divers and survey teams can glide above roads once walked by residents who lived millennia before classical Athens reached its height. Imagine swimming over intersections older than many civilizations remembered in writing. What makes Pavlopatry feel so strange is that it combines two worlds at once: prehistoric city planning and a submerged ghost town. The sea did not destroy it entirely. It preserved enough for us to realize how advanced forgotten people already were. Story 18. For centuries, Heracleion stood in the strange space between legend and history. Ancient texts mentioned a wealthy Egyptian port near the mouth of the Nile, a major gateway of trade and religion where foreign merchants arrived and rulers passed through ceremonial rites. Yet no visible ruins remained, and many people assumed the city had slipped into myth, another story swallowed by time like Atlantis. Then in 2001, while searching waters off the coast of Egypt, underwater archaeologists located something astonishing beneath layers of sand and mud: the lost city itself. Also known as Thonis Heracleion, the site had sunk into the Mediterranean more than 1,000 years earlier, likely due to earthquakes, soil liquefaction, rising seas, and gradual subsidence. What had seemed imaginary was resting underwater the entire time. As divers excavated the seabed, they uncovered an urban treasure vault. Massive statues of pharaohs and deities emerged from darkness. Temple remains connected to Amun worship were identified. Stone slabs carried inscriptions in both Greek and ancient Egyptian, reflecting a cosmopolitan trading center bridging cultures. Gold coins, ceremonial objects, sarcophagi, bronze weights, and everyday artifacts painted a picture of real civic life rather than legend. Perhaps most dramatic were the Maritime finds. Dozens of ancient ships and hundreds of anchors, proof of a harbor once crowded with traffic. This was no minor settlement. It had been one of the Mediterranean's vital commercial arteries before Alexandria rose to dominance. The association with Cleopatra, the seventh Philopater, and ceremonial traditions only deepens its aura, connecting the city to some of the last great chapters of ancient Egypt. What makes Heracleion so strange is that it wasn't destroyed in the usual sense. It simply sank, disappeared from sight, and let myth grow over fact until divers proved both were true at once. Story 19. Drifting through polar and cold ocean waters. Sea Angel looks exactly like something given that name by someone who saw it and had no better explanation. Transparent, delicate, and winged, it moves through the water with graceful flapping motions that make it resemble a tiny living spirit more than a slug. For once, the poetic nickname actually matches reality. What makes sea angels so surprising is that they are, biologically speaking, a type of swimming sea slug. Most people hear slug and imagine something slow, soft, and crawling across land or reef surfaces. Sea angels ignore all of that. They have evolved into free-swimming pelagic predators, drifting in the open ocean and propelling themselves with wing-like structures called parapodia. Instead of creeping, they fly underwater. Their bodies are often nearly transparent, allowing internal organs to faintly show through. Combined with their fluttering movement, they look ethereal and almost artificial. like tiny animated glass ornaments suspended in blue water. In some species, the head can extend feeding structures outward to capture prey, adding a sudden, hidden complexity beneath the gentle appearance. And they are predators. Many hunt sea butterfly species, another group of small floating snails. So, beneath the angelic look is a specialized hunter adapted to cold seas and planktonic life. Nature loves disguising efficient designs inside beautiful packaging. They're especially associated with Arctic and Antarctic environments, where the surrounding icy waters make them seem even more otherworldly. Tiny winged organisms drifting beneath sea ice sounds like fantasy, yet it's everyday ecology. What makes sea angels feel strange is the contrast. They look like symbols, but they're animals. They look delicate, but they hunt. They're slugs, yet they fly through water with elegance most fish would envy. Story 20. Floating through the deep ocean, almost completely invisible, glass octopus is one of those creatures that seems to erase itself from reality. Unlike the solid-bodied octopuses people picture, this rare deep-sea species has a body so transparent that much of its internal structure can be seen straight through it. In the dark open ocean, it looks less like an animal and more like a drifting ghost. What makes the glass octopus so extraordinary is how little there appears to be. Most of the body is nearly clear, with only certain organs, the optic nerve, digestive tract, and eyes standing out as visible structures. Imagine seeing a pair of eyes and a few floating organs moving through water, with the rest of the creature almost absent. It feels like an unfinished render of an octopus rather than a real organism. That transparency is a smart adaptation for life in the mid-water zone, where there's nowhere to hide. In open ocean depths, camouflage often means not looking like anything at all. By minimizing pigment and visible tissue, the animal becomes extremely hard for predators or prey to detect. Like other cephalopods, it still carries the intelligence and flexibility associated with octopuses. Arms can curl, grasp, and maneuver with remarkable precision. But when those arms are nearly invisible, the movement becomes even stranger. You may notice motion before you notice the creature itself. Encounters with glass octopuses are rare because they inhabit deep pelagic environments that humans seldom observe directly. Each filmed sighting feels like catching a glimpse of something that shouldn't exist. What makes the glass octopus feel alien is that it takes a familiar, intelligent animal and strips away almost all visible substance. It's an octopus reduced to essentials: eyes, nerves, motion, and intention, gliding through darkness like living glass. Story 21. Stretching through the deep ocean like a living cable, giant siphonophore is one of the strangest large organisms on Earth, because it isn't really one organism in the way most people imagine. It is a colonial animal made of countless specialized units called zooids, genetically identical bodies linked together and functioning as a single coordinated whole. Some parts feed, some reproduce, some sting prey, some help with movement. It's less like one creature and more like an entire society fused into one body. What makes giant siphonophores so astonishing is their scale. Certain species can extend for dozens of meters, with some observations suggesting lengths rivaling or exceeding the largest whales. Yet despite that size, they are delicate, gelatinous, and often nearly transparent, drifting through darkness with impossible grace. Imagine something longer than a blue whale that looks like a strand of glass beads and venomous filaments suspended in black water. Many species use tentacles armed with stinging cells to capture fish, crustaceans, and plankton. Those tentacles can trail far from the main body, turning the animal into a vast living net. Some forms glow with bioluminescence, creating pulses or chains of light in the deep sea. Their body plan feels alien because individuality breaks down. Where does one animal end and many begin? A siphonophore blurs that line completely. Each zooid may be highly modified and incapable of living independently, yet together they create something larger and more capable than any unit alone. They're often found in deep waters rarely seen by humans, which only adds to the mystique. When remotely operated vehicles film them, they can look like floating architecture rather than biology. What makes giant siphonophores feel so unreal is that nature built a superorganism of immense length from tiny cooperating bodies, then hid it in the ocean where almost no one would believe it. Story 22, buried deep below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, explorers recovered relics from one of humanity's greatest technological leaps. Engines from the Apollo program moon rockets. For decades, the immense Saturn V first-stage engines were thought lost forever after plunging into the ocean shortly after launch. Then expeditions located debris fields thousands of meters down, where pieces of the machines that helped send humans to the moon had been resting in darkness since the 1960s. What makes this discovery so strange is the contrast between purpose and resting place. These engines were built to escape Earth, generating unimaginable power to hurl astronauts towards space. Yet, after only minutes of use, they fell back into the sea and disappeared onto the seabed, where pressure, cold, and silence replaced fire and thunder. The most famous recovered pieces came from the giant F-1 engines, still the most powerful single-chamber liquid-fueled rocket engines ever flown. They burned kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing enormous thrust at liftoff. Finding twisted injector plates, engine bells, and serial-numbered components on the ocean floor was like discovering the bones of a metal titan. Some recovered parts were later conserved and displayed, reconnecting them with history after decades underwater. In a sense, they became archaeological artifacts almost immediately after their creation, machines from the space age preserved like shipwreck treasure. What makes the Apollo engine finds feel so uncanny is that they collapse eras together. Ancient wrecks and lost cities are expected beneath the sea. But modern rocket hardware, tools of lunar exploration, lying beside sediment and marine life, feels like the future becoming ruins. The ocean kept them hidden until we were ready to retrieve pieces of the machines that once carried us beyond it. Story 23, off the coast of Gulf of Cambay, India. Sonar surveys in the early 2000s revealed shapes on the seabed that triggered one of the boldest archaeological claims imaginable: the remains of a lost city that might predate every known urban civilization. Images appeared to show geometric patterns, linear features, and possible foundations buried beneath murky waters, leading some to speculate that an organized settlement had once stood there before rising seas submerged it. What made the story explode was the suggested age. Material dredged from the area, including a piece of wood, was reported as being around 9,500 years old. If that date directly represented a built city, it would place urban development thousands of years earlier than the conventional timelines associated with places like Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley. That would be revolutionary. But this is where the mystery becomes controversial. Many archaeologists and geologists urged caution. The Gulf of Cambay has strong currents, heavy sediment movement, and complex natural deposits. Objects dredged from the seabed may not all come from a single site or context, and ancient wood does not automatically prove an ancient city. It can be naturally preserved material, redeposited remains, or disconnected from any architecture. Likewise, sonar shapes that look man-made can sometimes be geological formations or imaging artifacts. That doesn't make the discovery meaningless. It does show that submerged landscapes in the region may preserve traces of very ancient human activity, from periods when sea levels were lower after the Ice Age. Entire coastlines once inhabited are now underwater worldwide. What makes the Gulf of Cambay so fascinating is that it sits between possibility and proof. It may represent drowned prehistoric settlements, misunderstood data, or something still unresolved. Either way, it reminds us that some of humanity's oldest stories may now lie beneath the sea, where evidence is hardest to read. Story 24. Resting on the seafloor off the coast of New Jersey, United States, lies one of the strangest industrial discoveries ever made underwater: a locomotive graveyard. In 1985, divers encountered a cluster of old steam locomotives sitting beneath the Atlantic, heavily rusted but still recognizable, like iron ghosts parked where no railroad had ever run. The engines dated back to the 1850s, which only deepened the mystery. There were no clear records explaining why locomotives ended up offshore, and in some cases, little documentation even confirming the specific machines themselves. Finding multiple 19th century locomotives on the seabed felt like uncovering a forgotten chapter of American industry that somehow slipped out of history. How do full-size trains wind up in the ocean? Historians have proposed a few explanations. They may have been cargo aboard barges or transport ships and accidentally lost during storms. Another theory suggests crews intentionally dumped them overboard to lighten a vessel in dangerous seas and prevent sinking. In the age before modern salvage logistics, sacrificing cargo to save lives in ships was not unheard of. What makes the site especially eerie is preservation through context. Though corroded, many of the locomotives remained in surprisingly coherent shape: wheels, boilers, frames, and heavy steel forms resting in sand among fish and marine growth. Technology built for smoke, coal, and rails now sits in darkness surrounded by saltwater life. For divers, it became a legendary wreck site because it combines two worlds that should never meet: railroads and the ocean floor. You expect ships underwater. You do not expect trains. What makes the locomotive graveyard so strange is that it feels like a mistake frozen in time, a lost industrial convoy lying offshore with no timetable, no station, and no final explanation. Story 25. Beneath about 40 feet of water in Lake Michigan, researchers discovered something that immediately sparked comparisons to ancient monuments: a circle-like arrangement of stones resting on the lakebed. Found in 2007 during sonar surveys, the site was quickly nicknamed the Lake Michigan Stonehenge, not because it matched the famous monument exactly, but because organized stone placements underwater naturally invite questions about human purpose and forgotten landscapes. What makes the find so strange is context. Today, the stones lie underwater, but thousands of years ago, water levels and shorelines in the Great Lakes region were very different. Areas now submerged were once dry land where people and animals moved across exposed terrain after the last ice age. That means an underwater site doesn't automatically begin underwater. It may be a terrestrial site, later claimed by rising waters. Some reports also noted what looked like a carved mastodon image on one stone, though interpretations remain debated and not universally accepted. If genuine and ancient, that would make the site even more significant, linking it to a time when humans and Ice Age megafauna overlapped in North America. But caution is important. Underwater imagery can be difficult to interpret, and sensational claims often outrun evidence. Unlike Stonehenge in England, the Lake Michigan Formation has not been established as a monumental ceremonial complex. It may be a hunting structure, markers, natural arrangement influenced by geology, or something not yet fully understood. The nickname is catchy, but the science remains more tentative. What makes the site fascinating is that it hints at drowned prehistoric landscapes hiding in places people rarely imagine. We think of lakes as timeless features, yet their shorelines shifted dramatically within human history. Sometimes the strangest discoveries are not alien ruins, but reminders that familiar places once looked completely different. Story 26, off the coast of Key West, Florida, United States, an amateur treasure hunter named Jay Miskovich claimed one of the most sensational underwater finds of the modern era, more than 10,000 emeralds scattered on the seabed. Announced in 2010, the discovery was valued in headlines at hundreds of millions of dollars and quickly became a global treasure story. Sunken riches, legal battles, mystery origins, and sudden fame. It had every ingredient of legend. At first, it looked like the jackpot of a lifetime. Media outlets covered the story heavily. Investors became interested, and speculation exploded over whether the gems came from a centuries-old Spanish shipwreck or some forgotten maritime disaster. If authentic and legally recoverable, the find could have transformed everyone involved. But treasure stories often become more complicated the moment they touch reality. Questions arose about ownership rights, salvage law, provenance, and whether the stones truly came from a historic wreck at all. Government authorities became involved, and temporary claims did not translate into easy profit. Without clear title and verified origin, priceless treasure can become financially unusable. Then the story turned tragic. Facing mounting debt, legal pressure, and the collapse of expectations, Miskovich died in 2013. What began as a dream discovery ended in controversy and personal ruin. Later scrutiny also cast serious doubt on whether the emerald cache was an authentic ancient treasure in the way first imagined. That uncertainty is part of what makes the case so strange. It wasn't simply about jewels, but about how value depends on story, legality, and proof as much as the objects themselves. 10,000 emeralds mean very different things depending on where they came from and who can claim them. What makes the emerald treasure unforgettable is that it reads like a modern cautionary myth, a fortune found underwater that brought attention, conflict, and heartbreak instead of freedom. Story 27. Along the coast of Alexandria, Egypt, parts of one of the ancient world's most famous cities now rest beneath the Mediterranean Sea. Long associated with Cleopatra, the seventh Philopater, the last pharaoh of Egypt, submerged districts of ancient Alexandria remained hidden for roughly 16 centuries before major underwater archaeological work in the late 20th century brought them back into view. What makes the site so extraordinary is scale. This isn't a lone shipwreck or isolated temple ruin. It is the drowned remains of a great urban center that once stood at the crossroads of Greek, Egyptian, and Roman worlds. Earthquakes, coastal subsidence, storms, and possible tsunami events gradually damaged and sank portions of the royal quarter and harbor zones into the sea. Instead of vanishing entirely, they settled underwater. Divers and researchers found monumental statues, columns, sphinxes, harbor structures, blocks from grand buildings, and artifacts tied to the Ptolemaic era. Massive stone pieces that once stood in sunlight now lie among fish and sediment, still recognizable after centuries beneath the waves. Seeing toppled royal architecture underwater creates a surreal sense that history has simply shifted location rather than disappeared. The connection to Cleopatra adds even more fascination. Though many details of her palaces and ceremonial spaces remain debated or fragmentary, Discoveries in Alexandria's submerged harbor regions help illuminate the final age of pharaonic Egypt and its encounter with Rome. There have also been recurring visions of creating underwater museum experiences or protected visitor routes so people could witness the ruins in situ rather than removing everything to land. Even the idea sounds futuristic, exploring an ancient capital beneath the sea. What makes submerged Alexandria so strange is that one of history's most celebrated cities did not end only in books and ruins on land. Part of it still waits underwater, where empire, legend, and marine life now share the same streets. Story 28, Resting in the Atlantic Depths, RMS Republic, is more than a shipwreck. It's one of those maritime mysteries where history and treasure lore became permanently tangled. The ocean liner sank in 1909 after a collision off the northeastern coast of the United States. And while the wreck itself was eventually located and explored in 1981, what truly captured imaginations was what might still be inside. Almost immediately, stories centered on hidden wealth. Some claimed the ship went down carrying large shipments of American gold coins. Others suggested a far more dramatic cargo, millions in gold intended as a financial loan to the Imperial Russian government. Adjusted to modern values, rumors pushed the possible treasure into the hundreds of millions or even billion-dollar range. Whether all of it was real, exaggerated, or misunderstood became part of the legend. That's what makes the Republic so fascinating. Unlike pirate myths or fantasy hoards, this was a real passenger liner with documented cargo, insurance records, and a known sinking. There was enough truth to keep speculation alive, but enough uncertainty to prevent closure. Perfect fuel for treasure hunters. Explorer Martin Bayerlo became closely associated with the wreck after locating it and chronicling the search in Billion Dollar Wreck. Yet despite years of effort, the grand fortune many hoped for was never cleanly recovered in the dramatic way people imagined. The wreck kept its secrets. Shipwreck treasure stories often reveal something important. The idea of wealth can become as powerful as wealth itself. Investors, expeditions, lawsuits, books, and decades of obsession can orbit cargo no one has definitively seen. What makes the RMS Republic strange is that the real ship sank in 1909, but the second life of the wreck, as a legend of lost billions, has floated ever since. Story 29, Across the abyssal sea floor, thousands of meters below sunlight, lives a creature so strange that scientists named it after the closest ridiculous comparison they could think of: sea pig. Despite the nickname, it isn't a pig at all. It's a deep-sea sea cucumber, soft-bodied, pinkish, and equipped with tube-like appendages that make it look like a tiny inflated animal walking across the ocean floor. What makes sea pigs fascinating is how common they can be in a place humans almost never witness. In certain deep ocean regions, they gather in large numbers across sediment plains, moving slowly over mud in search of edible organic material drifting down from above. While they may be abundant, they live so far beneath the surface that most people will never encounter one outside footage from research submersibles. More formally classified in the genus Scotoplanes, they inhabit abyssal zones often between roughly 10,000 and 20,000 feet deep across parts of the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Southern Oceans. That means they thrive in cold darkness under pressures that would crush unprotected surface life. Yet to them, it's just home. Their odd legs are modified tube feet used to move along soft sediment. Watching one march slowly across the seabed feels surreal, like seeing a plush toy come to life in zero light. Some species can even orient themselves with currents or chemical cues to find richer feeding grounds. What makes sea pigs feel so alien is the contrast between appearance and environment. They look comical and harmless, yet they are specialists built for one of the harshest habitats on Earth. In a world of giant predators and bioluminescent monsters, the deep sea also made pink walking cucumbers and decided that was perfectly normal. Story 30, not with jaws or claws, but from beneath the sand, one of the ocean's strangest predators waits almost completely hidden. Bobbit worm, scientifically known as Eunice aphroditois, looks like an ordinary marine worm until it starts hunting. Then it becomes something far more unsettling. Most of its long, segmented body remains buried in seabed sediment, with only sensitive antennae protruding above the surface. Those antennae detect vibrations, movement, or the presence of nearby prey. The moment something passes close enough, the worm launches upward with shocking speed, seizing fish or other animals with sharp jaws before dragging them underground. To observers, prey can seem to vanish instantly into the sand. That ambush style is what makes it so unnerving. There's no chase, no warning, just a sudden eruption from below. In reef tanks and natural habitats alike, bobbit worms have gained a reputation for mysterious disappearances because victims are often taken before anyone understands what happened. They're also opportunistic feeders. While famous as predators, they can consume a range of material, including smaller animals, organic remains, and whatever the environment offers. In the deep logic of evolution, versatility is valuable. Another reason they feel nearly indestructible is regeneration. Like many segmented worms, damaged portions can sometimes regrow to varying degrees, making them harder to eliminate than people expect. Cut one incorrectly, and you may create more problems than solutions. Some individuals can grow to impressive lengths, with much of the body hidden out of sight. That means what looks like a short, exposed head may belong to a far larger animal beneath the substrate. What makes killer worms like the bobbit worm feel alien is that they turn the seafloor itself into a trap. Nature took the humble idea of a worm and transformed it into a buried, spring-loaded predator waiting in silence. Story 31. Beneath the ocean's surface, there are places where it looks as if a second river is flowing through the sea itself. These so-called underwater rivers are among the strangest natural phenomena on Earth. Channels of denser water moving along the seafloor in ways that visually resemble rivers, complete with banks, currents, and even waterfalls. At first glance, it seems impossible. Water inside water shouldn't form a river, but the ocean is not one uniform substance. Differences in salinity, temperature, and suspended sediments can create layers with different densities. When one body of water becomes heavier than the surrounding water, it can sink and flow downslope along the seabed like a submerged current. Some famous examples occur where extremely salty water spills from one basin into another. The denser water hugs the bottom, carving pathways and creating distinct boundaries visible to submersibles. In certain locations, these flows continue for great distances, almost like hidden highways crossing the deep ocean. Even stranger, some of them generate undersea waterfalls. A well-known case in the Denmark Strait between Greenland and Iceland involves cold, dense water plunging downward beneath lighter water, forming one of the largest waterfalls on Earth by volume, except it happens entirely underwater. These currents also matter geologically. Over long timescales, dense bottom flows can erode sediments, shape channels, and help sculpt canyons across the sea floor. So, some of the ocean's hidden landscapes may have been carved by rivers no human standing on land could ever see. What makes underwater rivers feel so alien is that they break a rule most people assume is basic reality. We picture rivers ending at the sea. In some places, they keep going once they get there. Story 32. Far below the waves, where sunlight disappears and pressure rules everything, lives a shark that looks like it belongs to another age entirely. Goblin shark is one of the strangest members of the shark family, a rare deep-sea species whose lineage stretches back roughly 125 million years. That means relatives of its branch were already around, while dinosaurs still dominated the land. The first thing people notice is the face. It has a long, flattened snout, extending over a narrow mouth packed with sharp, protruding teeth, giving it a skeletal, almost unfinished appearance. Then there's the jaw mechanism, which is even stranger. When striking prey, the jaws can shoot forward dramatically from the skull in a rapid snap, extending outward like a spring-loaded trap before retracting again. It's one of the most bizarre feeding motions in the ocean. Despite the intimidating look, goblin sharks are built for deep water rather than speed. Their bodies are softer and less streamlined than fast surface hunters like great whites or makos. In dark environments where prey encounters may be rare, ambush efficiency matters more than athletic elegance. Their elongated snout is packed with sensory organs that help detect faint electrical signals from hidden prey. They can reach impressive lengths, with some large individuals reported near 20 feet, though most encounters are with smaller specimens. Because they live so deep, humans are unlikely to meet one naturally, except through rare bycatch or submersible footage. That remoteness adds to the mythic quality. And yes, the frilled shark deserves mention too. Another primitive-looking deep-sea species with eel-like form and rows of needle teeth. Proof that shark evolution explored many unsettling directions. What makes the goblin shark so eerie is that it takes a familiar predator and reworks it for a hidden world, turning the classic shark silhouette into something ancient, awkward, and deeply effective. Story 33. Beneath the cold waters of the North Sea lies a lost world once walked by humans and animals alike. Known as Doggerland, this vanished landscape connected what is now Britain to mainland Europe during the last ice age. Instead of open sea, there were rivers, marshes, forests, lakes, and broad plains where prehistoric people hunted, traveled, and settled. Then rising seas gradually drowned it around 8,000 years ago. For centuries, nobody thought much about the submerged plain beneath the North Sea. But modern dredging, sonar mapping, and collaboration with offshore energy industries began revealing something extraordinary: traces of an entire Stone Age world preserved on the seabed. Fishermen and survey teams brought up worked flints, tools, weapons, animal bones, peat, and ancient timber. What looked like empty marine space turned out to be a buried human landscape. Among the most haunting discoveries are preserved footprints. Human and animal tracks impressed into ancient mud can survive when rapidly buried by sediment and later protected underwater. A footprint is different from a tool or bone. It captures a moment rather than an object. Someone stepped there, shifted weight, and moved on tens of thousands of years ago. That instant then outlived civilizations. Claims of very old footprints and drowned forests add to the mystery, though exact dates vary by site and evidence type. What is certain is that Doggerland was inhabited repeatedly over long spans of prehistory before the sea erased it from memory. What makes Doggerland so strange is scale. This wasn't a sunken village or isolated ruin, but an entire region large enough to reshape how people moved across Europe. The North Sea doesn't just cover water, it covers roads, campsites, trees, tracks, and a chapter of human life once visible under open sky. Story 34. In the black depths of the ocean, where sunlight never reaches, some predators make their own light. Among the strangest is the barbelled dragonfish, a deep-sea hunter equipped with glowing organs and a luminous lure hanging from its jaw. In a world of permanent darkness, light becomes bait, camouflage, signal, and weapon all at once. The dragonfish uses that dangling glow to attract curious prey close enough for a sudden strike. Once the target approaches, it meets long, needle-like teeth and a predator built for ambush. Many species are dark-bodied or nearly black, helping them disappear into the surrounding water while only the lure remains visible. Imagine seeing a tiny floating light in darkness, then realizing the darkness itself has teeth. Some dragonfish are even stranger than that. Certain species can produce red bioluminescence, unusual in the deep sea where most creatures mainly detect blue wavelengths. That may allow them to illuminate prey with a kind of hidden flashlight few other animals can perceive. Its stealth technology evolved from fish. Then there's the anglerfish, perhaps the most famous glowing predator. Different species come in wildly different forms, but many share the iconic rod-like extension tipped with a luminescent lure. They sit motionless, wave the light, and wait for something hungry or curious to drift too close. Oversized jaws and inward-pointing teeth do the rest. What makes these animals so eerie is how intelligently darkness has shaped them. On land, predators chase or stalk using sight and speed. In the abyss, some simply become the trap. They turn absence of light into an advantage and let prey come willingly. What makes glowing predators feel alien is that they weaponized illumination itself. In the deep ocean, the flashlight is attached to the monster. Story 35, far below the surface, where strange body plans become normal, lives a creature that looks like it was assembled from spare parts. Gulper eel, also called the pelican eel, has the long ribbon-like body you'd expect from an eel, but then the head changes everything. Attached to that narrow body is an enormous, expandable mouth, so outsized that it seems impossible for the rest of the animal. The jaws open into a huge pouch-like gape, giving the fish a look somewhere between a net, a frying pan, and a nightmare. Tiny teeth line the edges, but the teeth are less impressive than the sheer size of the mouth itself. It can engulf prey much larger than you'd expect for such a slender animal. A useful trick in the deep sea where meals may be rare and unpredictable. If food appears, the best strategy may be to swallow first and sort details later. Unlike powerful surface predators, gulper eels are not muscular speed machines. They're built for an energy-poor environment where efficiency matters more than elegance. Their tails may even end in glowing organs in some species, possibly used as lures in darkness. So the creature doesn't just have an oversized trapdoor mouth, it may also fish with light. They inhabit deep ocean zones thousands of feet down and are rarely seen alive, which adds to the surreal reputation. Most people only know them from submersible footage or preserved specimens, where the proportions look too bizarre to be natural. What makes the gulper eel feel alien is contrast. A thin, delicate body attached to a mouth absurdly too large for it, all drifting through darkness where almost no humans will ever witness it firsthand. The deep sea took the concept of eat what you can and turned it into anatomy. Story 36, almost 1,000 miles east of Japan, hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean, lies a volcanic giant so vast that it changes how people picture mountains and eruptions. Tamu Massif is considered by many measures one of Earth's largest volcanoes, yet Unlike famous peaks such as Vesuvius or Fuji, it exists entirely underwater. Most people have never heard of it simply because no one can stand on it and look up. What makes Tamu Massif so staggering is scale. Rising more than 14,000 feet from the seafloor, with its summit still thousands of feet below sea level, it spreads across an area of over 200,000 square miles. That means this single volcanic structure rivals regions rather than mountains. It is less a cone and more a planetary landform hidden beneath the ocean. Discovered and studied in the modern era by marine geophysicist William Sager and colleagues, the massif likely formed around 140 million years ago during the Jurassic period. Massive outpourings of lava built it gradually on the seafloor, creating an enormous shield-like structure. For millions of years, it sat unnoticed beneath deep water, while dinosaurs rose and vanished above sea level elsewhere. Its underwater location also explains why discoveries like this arrive late. We mapped the moon before fully understanding many landscapes on our own ocean floor. Sonar and marine geophysics revealed what eyesight never could. Thankfully, researchers believe Tamu Massif is extinct, a sleeping titan unlikely to erupt again. But even dormant, it remains awe-inspiring. What makes Tamu Massif so strange is perspective. Humanity often thinks the greatest landmarks are the ones visible on land, yet one of Earth's grandest volcanoes has spent its entire known existence hidden in darkness beneath the sea.